I was 19 when my dad called me a parasite. My name's Caleb, and I'd just come back from my shift at a grocery warehouse, dead on my feet and stinking of freezer burn and cardboard. I still remember the sound of the garage door slamming shut behind me, like a cell door closing, and the look on my dad's face when I walked into the kitchen. Disgust, like he'd stepped in something foul. He didn't even say hi. He just flicked his eyes up from the bills spread across the counter and muttered, "Of course you're home already. You always slither back here like you've got nowhere better to be." That was a Tuesday. I remember because I had 2 more warehouse shifts that week and a midterm paper due for the one college class I was clinging on to. I wasn't the kind of kid who took things personally, not until that day, but something about the way he said slither stuck in my chest. I didn't say anything, just opened the fridge for a bottle of water. He scoffed loudly, like even that was too much. "You ever think about pitching in for groceries? Or do you just assume the food magically appears?" he barked. Then, as if he was correcting himself, he added, "Oh wait, you do pitch in. You eat it." I could have said a lot right then. I could have reminded him that I did pitch in, that I covered my own phone bill, paid rent when I could, worked 30-hour weeks on top of my school load, that I did my laundry, cleaned up after myself, and didn't drink or smoke or party like my older brother Ryan did back when he still lived with us. But I didn't say any of that. I just kept quiet. I always did. That's how it had been growing up. Dad talked, and the rest of us fell in line. My mom, Jill, was in the living room, pretending not to hear anything. She was good at that. She had a book open on her lap and her reading glasses perched on her nose, but she wasn't flipping pages. She just sat there like a statue, hoping if she didn't move, he'd forget she was there. That was her go-to move when Dad started up, disappear. And honestly, I didn't blame her. She'd been dealing with his moods for over 2 decades. I guess that's what made that day feel different. That heavy silence from her. It used to feel like neglect, but now it felt more like fear. Dad started pacing. "You're 20 in a few months, Caleb." 20. You think I was living off my parents at 20? I was working full-time, paying rent, planning a life. Not mooching around, pretending I was tired from lifting cereal boxes or whatever it is you do. I wanted to say, "You mean those cereal boxes that pay for your Netflix account?" But my tongue stayed locked behind my teeth. And then he said it. "You're a parasite." 3 words. Sharp and casual, like he was describing the weather. He said it while looking at the ceiling, not even at me. Like I was just something that had attached itself to his life, feeding off him, dragging him down. That word, it didn't even sound like English at first. I had to repeat it in my head. Parasite. He wasn't drunk. He wasn't angry in the shouty, red-faced way people expect when they hear stories like this. No, he was calm. Cold. That was what made it worse. He meant it. I stood there, frozen. The fridge door hung open behind me, and cold air spilled out across my ankles. I still had my steel-toed boots on, the same pair I'd worn every day for the last year. They were scuffed and smelled like sweat and cardboard glue. I'd bought them myself, paid in installments. He took a step closer. "You think you've got it rough? Please. You sleep under this roof. Eat our food. Use our power, our water. And for what? Some pathetic paycheck and a D- in creative writing." "I got a B+. I muttered, finally finding my voice. "What?" I looked up at him. "I got a B+. In creative writing." He blinked, like the sentence hadn't registered. Then he snorted and turned away, muttering, "Even worse. A B+ in a useless degree." Mom didn't look up. I remember that more than anything. She just kept staring at that same page. Like maybe, if she just stayed quiet, the moment would pass. But it didn't. That was just the start. The next week, things got colder, literally and figuratively. Dad started forgetting to refill the heating oil. It was late October, and our little 2-story was already freezing at night. I asked if I could turn on the space heater in my room. He said, "Get a second job. Maybe then you'll earn some warmth." I laughed because I thought he was joking. He wasn't. When I came home from work the next day, my space heater was gone. So was my mini fridge. He'd taken both. "Too much strain on the power bill," he said. "You want to keep luxuries like that, get your own place." I didn't argue. Arguing never worked with him. If you pushed, he'd push back harder. His way or nothing. But I did start staying later at work. Volunteered for closing shifts. Even picked up a few Saturday morning deliveries. Not because I loved my job, but because it was warm and nobody called me a parasite there. Then came the real kicker. One night, I came home and found a little cardboard box sitting in front of my bedroom door. Inside was a mess of my stuff. USB cables, some cologne I never wore, a couple of paperback books. Taped to the top was a sticky note. Start packing. That night at dinner, he didn't say a word. Neither did I. The only sound was the scraping of utensils and the occasional clink of a glass. Mom picked at her salad like it had personally offended her. When I stood up to put my plate in the sink, Dad finally spoke. You've got until the end of the week. I paused. End of the week for what? To move out. I didn't respond. I just stared at him. He set down his fork and leaned back in his chair, all casual confidence. You're a man, right? You want to live like one? Earn your keep? Fine. Be a man. Go figure it out. My mouth felt dry. You're kicking me out. I'm inviting you to stop being a freeloader. You really think I'm a freeloader? He raised his eyebrows like he couldn't believe I was even asking. I don't think it. I know it. And that was it. No fight. No explosion. Just a calm, final sentence. I waited for Mom to say something. Anything. But she just got up and carried her plate to the sink. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering what I'd done that was so wrong. I wasn't perfect, sure, but I'd never once caused trouble. I'd never broken rules. I'd done everything I was supposed to do, and somehow that still made me the enemy. Maybe part of me always knew something like this would happen. Dad had always been harder on me than anyone else. Ryan, my older brother, got away with everything. He dropped out of college, crashed 2 cars, moved back in twice, and still got treated like a returning hero. I, on the other hand, was the quiet one, the good son, the disappointment. I think he resented me for not giving him anything obvious to criticize. So he made things up instead, like calling me a parasite, like acting like I owed him for the air I breathed. That week passed in a blur. I packed quietly, stored what I could in my car, found a cheap room to rent above a retired couple's garage. It wasn't much, but it had a door I could close and silence I could count on. The day I left, he didn't help me carry a single box, just stood in the doorway with his arms crossed and said, about time. I didn't hug Mom goodbye. She didn't offer one, just gave me a small, unreadable look that I carried with me for weeks. And that should have been the end. But it wasn't, because exactly 1 month later, everything flipped. And the man who threw me out with a smirk and called me a parasite, he ended up standing at my door, begging. But I'll get to that. First, you need to know what happened at their house while I was gone. Because the truth, the real truth, didn't just crack the walls. It blew the entire house down. I didn't hear from my parents for the first 2 weeks after I moved out. No calls, no texts, not even one of those passive-aggressive forwarded memes my mom used to send every Sunday. Honestly, I didn't expect much, but the silence still stung. After all the years I spent trying to be the good kid, I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd check in, ask if I landed okay, wonder how I was eating. But nope, radio silence. My new place was a single-room setup above a retired couple's detached garage. Mr. and Mrs. Landon. They were sweet in that quiet, nosy but kind sort of way. She baked banana bread every Tuesday like clockwork, and he spent most of his day organizing screws in the shed. They had no kids of their own, which probably explained why they talked to me like I was their grandkid, offering me extra blankets, secondhand furniture, even a slow cooker they never used. At first, I felt awkward accepting any of it. But when you've just been thrown out by your own father and your ramen diet's looking bleak, a warm, slow-cooked stew tastes better than pride. So I said thank you. And I kept saying it. I focused on working longer hours and slowly saving up. I dropped my college class for now. It felt like the smart choice. I could barely afford gas, let alone textbooks. I figured I'd return when things stabilized. Except, deep down, I wondered if they ever would. Every night before bed, I checked my phone. A stupid habit. I'd open my texts hoping maybe, just maybe, there'd be something from my mom. Not even an apology, just a crumb of acknowledgement. Hope you're doing okay. Stay warm. Call me. But there was never anything. Until the 3rd week. I got a text from an unknown number that simply read, "He's going too far." I stared at the screen, my heart doing that uneven stutter it does when something's off. A minute later, a second text came through. Delete these after reading. I can't talk long. It was Mom. Her number had changed, probably Dad's doing. He always had this thing about monitoring plans and switching carriers to save money, though it usually meant switching to whatever provider offered him more control over the family account. Her 3rd message came seconds later. "He told everyone you hit him." I read that one 3 times. Then again out loud. My brain didn't register it. Hit him? What? She continued. He told your uncle that you shoved him against the wall before you left. That you screamed at me. Said you trashed your room and ran off in a rage. Everyone thinks you were violent. I dropped the phone. Literally. My fingers just gave up. It hit the floor and bounced under the small desk I'd set up beside my twin bed. I stood there frozen, like if I didn't move, maybe none of it would be true. Maybe I'd hallucinated it all. But when I finally crouched down and picked the phone back up, the messages were still there. A final one had arrived. I'm sorry. I didn't defend you. He made me choose. I didn't know what to do. That was the last I heard from her that night. And that was the night something inside me broke. It wasn't the lie itself that hurt the most. It was knowing why he'd told it. Because for as long as I could remember, Dad lived off narratives. He twisted truth into whatever version made him look strongest. He never made mistakes. Never backed down. And if anyone ever challenged that illusion, he'd rewrite the story to suit him. So when people started asking why his youngest son, his good-for-nothing parasite, suddenly moved out with no explanation, he had 2 choices. Admit he'd thrown me out for no reason, or claim I was dangerous. Of course he picked the latter. Of course he told the story where he was the noble, concerned father who'd finally had to protect his wife from their ungrateful, volatile son. And Mom, she didn't correct him. That stung more than anything. I tried to brush it off at first. I told myself it didn't matter what people thought. Let them believe I was a monster. What did it change? I was out. I was free. I had my own key, my own mailbox, my own microwave. I was scraping by, sure, but it was mine. But then my aunt stopped responding to my texts. Then my cousin Jordan, who used to send me memes and random voice notes daily, unfollowed me on Instagram. Then I heard from a coworker that someone from church had told her my family had cut ties for safety reasons. It wasn't just a lie. It was a smear campaign. I was being erased. It all boiled over when I saw Ryan again. It was late November, a week before Thanksgiving. I was doing a grocery delivery run near the old neighborhood when I stopped for gas and saw him by the pump. Ryan looked the same as always. Designer jacket, hair gelled back, expensive sunglasses even though the sky was gray. He was leaning against his shiny black SUV like he was waiting for paparazzi to show up. He spotted me and gave this mocking little half smile. Well, if it isn't baby bro thought you disappeared. I kept it short. Just working. He nodded at the beat-up Civic I was driving. Living the dream, huh? I didn't rise to it. I just nodded. Something like that. Then he leaned closer, smirking. So, how's anger management going? I blinked. What? He laughed. Dad said you were getting help. Said you finally snapped. Told me you threw a lamp at Mom or something. That true? My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. He told you that? Yeah, man. Said he was scared for her. Said it was a last straw moment. I couldn't breathe for a second. You believed him? Ryan shrugged. Well, you did always have a temper. That did it. I stepped forward, just enough for him to flinch, and looked him square in the eye. You've known me your whole life. You've never seen me throw anything. Never seen me yell at Mom. Never seen me raise a hand to anyone. But you hear one lie from Dad, and that's it? You're sold. He hesitated. For a split second, I saw doubt in his eyes. But then it vanished. He rolled his shoulders back, scoffed, and said, Look, man, I'm just saying. If people are scared, there's probably a reason. I didn't say anything else. I just got in my car and drove off. My hands were shaking on the wheel. That was the moment. The moment I realized I wasn't just being pushed out. I was being replaced. The following Sunday, I made the mistake of checking Facebook. I barely used it anymore, but something compelled me to look. There it was. A photo Mom had posted. Their living room, decorated for Thanksgiving. Big table full of food. Candles lit. Fire roaring in the background. Ryan sitting in my old chair at the table. Caption, grateful for family. So lucky to have my boys. My boys. I wasn't even tagged. That post got dozens of comments. Beautiful family. So handsome. Glad things are better now. You deserve peace. Peace. I stared at that word until it blurred. I didn't sleep that night. My mind was spinning too fast. Every little sacrifice I'd made. Every insult I'd swallowed. Every attempt I'd made to keep the peace. And this is what I got? They didn't just push me out. They scrubbed me clean. Like I was never there. The final straw came a week later. I was finishing a delivery route when I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I answered, wary. Hello. A pause. Then, Caleb, it's your mother. Her voice was shaky. I sat down in the driver's seat, pulse racing. What's going on? She was crying. He found the texts. The ones I sent you. He took my phone. He said I betrayed him. I gripped the wheel. Did he hurt you? No, not like that. He just screamed. Said I was disloyal. Said I'd chosen a lying brat over my real family. I took a deep breath. You did choose him. That silenced her. A long pause. Then she whispered, I know I did. Another pause. Then came the words that made everything snap. He's moving Ryan into your room. Said he's the only son worth having. My room. My desk. My books. My walls with the photos I never got back. Everything I left behind. Gone. Replaced. That was it. That was the breaking point. Because at that moment, I stopped mourning. And I started planning. I didn't know how yet. Didn't know when. But something inside me hardened. If they wanted me out of their lives so badly, fine. But I wasn't leaving quietly. And when the dust finally settled, they'd regret the day they called me a parasite. Especially my father. He had skeletons. And I knew exactly where he buried them. They say rock bottom has a trap door. I didn't believe that. Until the Tuesday I lost my job. It wasn't dramatic. No yelling. No scenes. Just a short conversation in the manager's office. The kind where they look at the floor the entire time and speak in gentle tones like they're putting a wounded dog down. Budget cuts, my manager said, wringing her hands. They're slashing part-timers. I fought for you, Caleb. Really. But corporate said, it's okay. I said, even though it wasn't. I get it. I packed up my locker in silence. No one offered to help. A couple coworkers gave me that awkward half nod, half smile as I passed them, pity disguised as politeness. And just like that, the one lifeline I had left snapped in my hands. When I got back to my little studio over the garage, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat on the edge of my bed with my jacket still on, staring at the wall, wondering what exactly I'd done to deserve all this. The Landons knocked later that evening, worried after seeing my car in the drive all day. I told them I was fine, that I'd just caught something. I even forced a weak smile. They believed me. Or at least, they let me believe they did. The next morning, I opened my bank account and stared at the numbers like they might change if I blinked hard enough. $132.47. Rent was due in 11 days. Rock bottom. And that's when something weird happened. I laughed. Not a happy laugh. One of those broken, wheezing, you've got to be kidding me laughs that bubbles up from a place so deep inside, you almost forget you can make that sound. Because honestly, what else was there to do? I had no money, no job, no family. I was 19 years old, scraping the bottom of a soup can with a fork because I didn't own a spoon. And for the first time in my life, no one was watching. No one to impress. No one to disappoint. No father looming over me. No brother smirking from the sidelines. No mom wringing her hands and telling me to just keep my head down. It was just me. Alone. And it should have felt terrifying. But instead, it felt kind of freeing. I didn't sleep that night. My brain wouldn't shut up. Thoughts ricocheted off each other like pinballs. Panic, plans, regrets, memories. I kept thinking about all the times I stayed quiet when I should have spoken up. All the energy I spent trying to earn approval from people who only ever saw me as a burden. All the pieces of myself I'd clipped away over the years just to fit into their version of who I was supposed to be. And what did I get for all of it? A cardboard box of my things and a lie that I was dangerous. Somewhere around 3 a.m., I made a decision. If no one else was going to believe in me, I'd do it myself. The first step was surviving. I hit every local job board I could find. Restaurants, gas stations, warehouses. Anything with a pulse and a paycheck. I walked to nearby shops and handed out my resume. I applied to jobs I was wildly underqualified for. I even tried selling some of my old stuff online, but no one wanted a used backpack with one strap or a half-broken laptop. I started doing odd gigs, helping the Landons with yard work, driving people to the airport through sketchy apps, assembling furniture for people who couldn't figure out IKEA. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept me busy. And slowly, money trickled in. $40 here, $25 there. One morning, I helped Mr. Landon clean out his shed and found a bunch of old computer parts. I offered to sell them online for him. He shrugged and said sure. They went for $180. I gave him $100. He refused to take it. Put it toward rent, he said, smiling. Call it your commission. I didn't know what to say. No one had ever done something like that for me before. Not without strings attached. That night, Mrs. Landon left a bag of groceries outside my door. No note. Just kindness. It made me cry, quietly, into my pillow where no one could hear. Weeks passed. Then months. December rolled in bitter and sharp. I shoveled driveways to earn cash. Picked up seasonal work at a garden center stringing lights for minimum wage. Spent New Year's alone with a microwave burrito and a YouTube countdown. But I was still standing. Barely, but standing. And then something strange started happening. People noticed me. Not my parents. Not my old friends. New people. Real people. There was this one customer at the garden center, a woman in her 30s named Carla, who came in 3 times in 2 weeks asking for help with her patio lighting. I was friendly, patient, offered tips. Turns out she was a local interior designer. You ever consider learning digital design? She asked casually. You've got an eye for layout. You think spatially. That's rare. I shrugged. I used to like writing. Thought about graphic stuff once, but she gave me her card. You should try it. Seriously. I tossed the card in my glove box. But a week later, I pulled it out. Just to look. And that's when it started. I borrowed an old Chromebook from the Landons and started watching free tutorials online. Graphic design, typography, layout. I downloaded open source software and tinkered late into the night. I joined online forums. I posted my first design for feedback and got roasted. But one guy messaged me and said, "Your instincts are good. Just keep going." So I did. I redesigned logos for fake companies, made poster mock-ups, created Instagram ads for imaginary products. Within 2 months, I had a small portfolio. And one night, on a whim, I posted a "will work for cheap" ad on a freelance site. Within a week, someone bit. A small coffee shop in Ohio needed a new menu designed. They paid me $75. I almost cried. I used half that money to buy better software. The next job paid $150. Then $300. I was still delivering groceries on the weekends. Still helping the Landons rake leaves and clean gutters. But something had shifted. I had a skill. And more importantly, I had proof. I wasn't lazy. I wasn't a parasite. I wasn't useless. I was building something. Slowly, painfully, but it was mine. Then came the day that changed everything. A mid-sized startup needed a logo and brand kit. They found my profile through a client referral. The job was bigger than anything I'd done. I hesitated, but I said yes. I worked on it every night for 2 weeks. Obsessed over every pixel. Sketched drafts. Redrafted them. Then redrafted those. When I finally sent it off, I waited on pins and needles. The client replied within the hour. "This is perfect. We love it." They paid $850. I stared at the number on the screen for almost a full minute before it sank in. I could do this. I was doing this. By the end of March, I had 4 repeat clients. One of them sent me a $200 holiday bonus, just for being reliable. I was making enough to pay rent on time, buy real groceries, and even treat myself to take out every now and then. I bought new clothes. Not flashy ones, just a proper winter coat and shoes that didn't leak. I finally replaced my cracked phone screen. I even got my old laptop repaired. And then, I did something I never thought I'd do. I applied for community college again. Part-time. Design courses this time. No more forcing myself into writing classes just to make my dad think I was doing something smart. This time, I was doing it for me. It's funny how you can rebuild your life in plain sight, and the people who tried to break you will never notice until it's too late. They didn't notice when I got my first freelance client. Didn't notice when I landed a 5-star rating on my profile. Didn't notice when I filed taxes for the first time as an independent contractor. But they did notice something else. Because while I was quietly climbing, their house was crumbling. And one spring afternoon, just as I was finishing a brand presentation for a new client, I got a knock on my door. Not a text. Not a call. A knock. When I opened it, I had to blink twice to believe it. It was him. My dad. Looking like someone had reached into his chest and yanked something out. His tie was crooked. His hair was grayer than I remembered. His voice, when he finally spoke, cracked in the middle like a floorboard under weight. "Caleb," he said, "can we talk?" I said nothing, just leaned against the frame. He swallowed. Hard. I need a place to stay, just for a little while. And that's when it all clicked. The texts, the posts, the absence. The truth must have finally come out. The perfect house of lies had finally collapsed. And now the man who once threw me out like garbage was standing on my doorstep, begging to come in. I looked him up and down, took a deep breath, and with a calm, steady voice, I said, "Sorry, this parasite's all booked up, but that's not where it ends." Because what he did, what they both did, was worse than even I realized. And soon, the rest of it came spilling out, piece by ugly piece. He didn't leave right away. After I told him, "This parasite's all booked up," he just stood there on my porch like his knees had locked. For a second, I thought he might argue, maybe even throw a tantrum, the way he used to when something didn't go his way. But instead, he just looked at me with this hollow expression, like he didn't recognize me anymore. Good, because I wasn't the same kid he'd tossed out 4 months ago. I wasn't the quiet, obedient son who bit his tongue and folded into himself whenever his father raised his voice. I wasn't the invisible roommate they barely tolerated. I wasn't the family scapegoat who carried the weight of everyone else's dysfunction just to keep the peace. I was my own person now, and I had something he didn't. Peace of mind. I waited a few more seconds. He still didn't move. So I slowly closed the door, not slamming it, just easing it shut like I was putting an old book back on the shelf. Then I locked it. He didn't knock again. I stood there for a minute, hands braced on the wood, heart pounding like I'd just run a marathon. Not from fear, not even from adrenaline, from the power of it. The reversal. He had stood at my door and begged. The very man who once said I'd never make it on my own, who swore I was dead weight, who lied to my entire extended family about me throwing a lamp at my mother, was now out in the cold, asking me for shelter. And I gave him nothing. It felt like reclaiming a piece of my soul. But the high didn't last long, because later that night, as I lay awake staring at the cracked ceiling above my bed, questions started clawing at me. Why had he come to me? Why now? What had happened to them? I hadn't heard from Mom since her panicked call months ago. No updates. No warnings. And now suddenly, my dad shows up looking like a ghost of himself? Something had happened, and I needed to find out what. I didn't go straight for revenge. That's not how I operate. I'm not impulsive. Never have been. If I was going to do this, if I was going to finally stand up and hold them accountable, I needed information. Leverage. Timing. So I started where any good strategist does. With recon. First, I reached out to my cousin Jordan, the one who unfollowed me after the incident. I sent a single message. "Hey, I know what you were told. It wasn't true. If you ever want to hear my side, I'll talk." To my surprise, she replied that night. "I'm so sorry, Caleb. I didn't know what to believe. Your dad made it sound like you'd lost it, that you attacked your mom. But then, I heard what really happened. From Aunt Jill. My blood ran cold. Wait, she's talking now. Yeah, she left. 2 words. Like a thunderclap. Mom left. Left him. Apparently, she'd gone to stay with a friend across town. She'd been gone for a few weeks now. No posts. No updates. Just vanished quietly like she always did. Except this time, she didn't come back." Jordan explained that Mom had finally confessed the truth to one of her sisters. The real story. How Dad had been emotionally abusive for years. How he twisted facts, manipulated people, created chaos just to maintain control. And how he'd forced her to choose between loyalty to her husband or her son. Jordan ended the message with, "She regrets it, Caleb. A lot. She's not who she was back then." I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to call her, demand an apology. Part of me wanted to scream at her. Part of me wanted to drive across town and hug her. But more than anything, I wanted to understand what had changed. So I started digging. I called an old family friend, Mrs. Randall. She used to babysit Ryan and me when we were kids. She always saw through Dad's charm. "Oh, honey," she said when she answered. "I've been waiting for you to call." Turns out, the whole house of cards had come down in a spectacular mess. Ryan had moved into my old room. Yes, but he hadn't changed one bit. Same entitlement. Same laziness. He blew through his savings in 2 months, quit his job because the manager disrespected him, and started throwing house parties every weekend like it was college all over again. Mom tried to rein him in. Dad didn't. Instead, he encouraged Ryan, enabled him, gave him money, gave him excuses, the golden child treatment, until the day Mom found a notice in the mail, a foreclosure warning, because Dad hadn't been paying the mortgage. Apparently, he'd taken out a loan behind her back, a big one, to help Ryan start a business. Except Ryan didn't use it for a business. He used it for crypto, sports betting, and bottle service. $40,000. Gone. When Mom confronted them, everything exploded. She finally saw it, the full scope of what she'd been enabling. The favoritism, the lies, the weaponized loyalty. And this time, instead of retreating into silence, she packed a bag. Mrs. Randall's voice dropped low at this part. He didn't expect her to leave, Caleb. He always thought she'd stay. That's why he's unraveling. So that explained why he was at my door. But it didn't explain the part that came next. The part where I realized I had something he didn't know I had. You see, a while back, maybe a year before I got kicked out, I stumbled onto something by accident. Dad had been doing taxes on his laptop and asked me to print some forms. But when I plugged in the flash drive he gave me, I found a folder named Archive. Inside were PDFs, spreadsheets, scans of bank records. At the time, I didn't think much of it. I copied the one file he needed and moved on. But out of curiosity, I saved the folder to my own computer. Call it instinct. I hadn't looked at it since. Until now. What I found made my jaw drop. It was all there. Financial records dating back years. Bank transfers. Multiple credit card accounts I didn't recognize. A PayPal account under a fake name. Large withdrawals, thousands of dollars, transferred into an offshore account. And then, something else. An email chain between him and someone named N. Jacobs. They were discussing cash reimbursements and keeping paperwork off the books. It took me a few hours to piece it together, but when I did, the full picture made my stomach turn. Dad had been siphoning money from his old employer. Quietly, over years. Not embezzling, exactly. But close. Enough to raise legal eyebrows. The moment I realized it, my fingers hovered over my keyboard, uncertain. This wasn't just family drama anymore. This was leverage. But I didn't use it. Not yet. Like I said, I'm not impulsive. Instead, I started planning. I made backups, stored them on separate drives, printed key documents, and locked them in a folder. I even reached out to a family friend who worked in compliance law, not with a full confession, just vague hypotheticals. He told me something important. If it's internal fraud or tax avoidance, and you've got proof, you have options. Just be careful. If you go nuclear, be ready for the fallout. And that's when the plan started forming. I didn't want to destroy him. Not yet. I wanted him to feel what I felt. Disbelief, powerlessness, isolation. And then, when he was at his lowest, I'd offer him a choice. Truth or exposure. Redemption or ruin. Because no matter how many people he convinced I was the problem, no matter how many stories he spun to paint me as a threat, I held the receipts. Literally. And when the time was right, I'd use them. But first, I needed to understand where Mom stood. So I texted her. We should talk. Just once. I don't want anything from you. Just the truth. She replied within minutes. Tomorrow. 4 p.m. That little park by the lake. Bring a jacket. I stared at the message, heart pounding. Tomorrow. After all these months, I was finally going to see her. And maybe, just maybe, I'd find out if she was ready to tell the truth. Or if she was still hiding behind his shadow. Either way, I was ready. Because this time, I wasn't a scared kid. I was a man with a plan. And I was just getting started. The next afternoon, the air was cold enough to sting. The park by the lake was quiet. Just the sound of wind through bare branches and the dull splash of water against the bank. I saw Mom before she saw me. She was sitting on a bench near the pier, wrapped in a tan coat I didn't recognize. Her hair was shorter now, streaked with gray. She looked smaller somehow, not frail, just deflated. When she noticed me, she smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Hi, sweetheart. It was the first time she'd called me that in nearly a year. I sat beside her, keeping a polite distance. We both stared out at the lake for a while. The silence stretched, heavy but not hostile. Finally, she whispered, You look good, Caleb. I'm doing better, I said. Really better. I can tell. She hesitated, rubbing her hands together. I heard you're working. Doing design now. Yeah. Freelancing. Been getting steady clients lately. She nodded, smiling faintly. I'm proud of you. The words landed weird. Soft, but with years of absence echoing behind them. After a pause, I said, Why did you lie? She flinched. I didn't mean to. I panicked. He made it sound like it was you or him. And for so long, I thought keeping peace meant keeping him happy. And me miserable. Tears welled up in her eyes. I know that now. You didn't deserve it, Caleb. Any of it. I was a coward. That part one already knew. But hearing her admit it, out loud, without excuses, hit harder than I expected. She went on. After you left, he got worse. Angrier. Controlling. He'd sit in his chair every night, drink, and talk about how ungrateful everyone was. Then the money trouble started. I found the letters from the bank. When I confronted him, he told me it was all under control, that he was investing. She gave a bitter laugh. Turns out he was just losing. And when I told him I couldn't keep living like that, he said I could go, but not take a penny. So I packed my bags that night and left anyway. For the first time, she looked right at me. He's lost everything, Caleb. The house is on the market. The bank's taking the cars. He even got fired last week. They did an audit at work. I blinked. They caught him. Her eyes widened slightly. Caught him? You knew. I hesitated. Then I told her. Everything. The files I'd found. The records. The offshore accounts. At first, she just stared at me. Then, slowly, she let out a long breath. So that's why you looked so calm when he showed up at your door. Yeah. I already knew his empire was made of matchsticks. She covered her mouth, shaking her head. You could have gone to the police. I could have, I said. But I didn't want to see him in prison. I just wanted him to understand what helplessness feels like. I wanted him to sit in the ruins he built. Her eyes softened. And now, I looked at the water. Now I'm thinking about how to make sure he can't hurt anyone else. She reached for my hand. You already did. You're free. Maybe. But something in me still needed closure. Real closure. So I asked for her help. 2 days later, I showed up at my parents', his house. The for sale sign was already planted in the yard, leaning crookedly against the wind. The place looked smaller, emptier, as if it knew it was about to be abandoned. Dad opened the door before I even knocked. His face lit up for a second. Relief, maybe, but the moment he saw my expression, it vanished. What do you want? He asked, voice raw. I came to talk. He hesitated, then stepped aside. Make it quick. The house smelled stale. Boxes were stacked along the hallway. The living room was stripped bare, the walls pale where pictures used to hang. It didn't feel like a home anymore. Just a shell. He slumped into the armchair, the same one he used to sit in while lecturing me. Well? Say your piece. I sat across from him, calm, collected. I know about the money. He froze. The accounts, I continued. The transfers. The fake invoices. I found everything. A year ago. His eyes flicked toward me, narrow and sharp. What did you do with it? Nothing yet. I folded my hands. That's up to you. He barked a humorless laugh. So what? You're blackmailing me now? Great. Guess the apple didn't fall far after all. I'm not blackmailing you, I said quietly. I'm giving you a choice. He sneered. A choice? Yeah. You can come clean to the company yourself, admit what you did, pay what you can, and try to rebuild your life honestly. Or I can make a few calls, and they'll have everything. Every document. Every transaction. It'll be over by tomorrow. He leaned back, trying to smile, but his lips twitched. You think they'll believe you? You think anyone will take the word of some dropout? I already talked to them. That shut him up. They called me yesterday. I continued, keeping my tone even. Your company did their audit, but there were gaps. I filled them in. Sent them copies of the records. Told them I'd testify if needed. He went pale. I didn't send everything. I interrupted. Not yet. I gave them enough to investigate. The rest stays sealed. If you cooperate, you might get off with restitution and probation. If not, I shrugged. You'll lose more than your job. For a long moment, he just stared at me. His jaw clenched, unclenched. His hands trembled on the armrest. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, You've destroyed me. No, I said. You destroyed yourself. I just stopped cleaning up the mess. He didn't answer. He just stared past me, eyes unfocused, as if seeing the end of something he'd never thought could end. I stood up. The company will call you tomorrow. Cooperate, Dad. For once in your life, do the right thing. And then I left him there, alone in his empty house, the same way he'd left me. The fallout hit fast. Within a week, the audit expanded into a full investigation. His accounts were frozen. His former boss, the one he used to brag about golfing with, filed a formal complaint. The company released a statement about financial discrepancies under review. The small-town rumor mill exploded. For years, he'd been the guy everyone respected, the self-made man, the provider, the proud father. Now people whispered behind his back. Some even reached out to me, apologizing for believing the lies. Ryan? He vanished the second the money dried up. Moved in with some friend 2 towns over. Last I heard, he was trying to sell entrepreneurship courses online. As for mom, she started over. Got a job at a local library, rented a small apartment, and slowly began living for herself again. She and I met for coffee every Sunday. It wasn't perfect, too many ghosts between us, but it was a start. And me? My freelance work took off. The client I designed that startup logo for recommended me to another firm. And within months, I was juggling enough projects to turn it into a full-time business. I even upgraded from the garage apartment to a small studio downtown. The first night there, I sat on the floor eating takeout, looking out at the city lights through my one clean window. I thought about everything. The years of being belittled, the lies, the exile. And then I thought about the way my father looked when I walked out that door. Not angry, not furious, just small. The same way I'd felt once. Except I didn't need revenge anymore. Because I'd already won. Months later, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten, shaky cursive. Caleb, I confessed. They're letting me repay what I took over time. I'm working part-time now, staying with an old coworker. I know you don't owe me anything, but I wanted to tell you, I was wrong about you. About everything. You're not a parasite. You're the only one who learned how to live. Dad, I read it once, folded it carefully, and slid it into a drawer. Not out of bitterness, but because I didn't need to reply. I'd already said everything that mattered when I closed that door months ago. I stepped out onto my balcony that evening, breathing in the cool spring air. The city hummed below, alive and indifferent. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't angry. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I'd built a life from the ground up, one honest piece at a time. And when I finally whispered into the night, it wasn't a curse or a grudge, just a quiet truth. I'm free. If you've enjoyed my story, consider subscribing for more similar videos.